Hello again, everyone. This is a longer podcast-style video, so I highly recommend that before we get started, you grab a snack, grab a drink, and get comfortable. And I hope we entertain you all the way through to the end. Thanks for watching. Okay, what the fuck are we doing? That's the whole intro. Let's go.
Right. So, trying this for the second time.
Yeah, because we're bad at this.
Because we're bad at things. Uh, so to summarize this whole video, we recently found out that a certain character in the Jurassic Park fandom by the name of Crusher has gained a bit of a second wind.
Because we old, and kids are getting
Yeah.
older.
Yeah.
Which means
I
young
didn't
writers.
think. Yep, the old writers have grown out of it, including me, the person who made the character, and the new writers are just discovering it.
Yeah.
So the loop begins again. But yeah, so as I mentioned, Crusher is a character that I came up with years and years ago, back in ye old 2005, and it kind of took off. I wasn't really expecting this level of cult following when I made the character. He started off as more of a toy than anything, because back in the day, well, early 2000s wasn't a good time for Jurassic Park and dinosaur fans in my part of the world. You couldn't get toys that were dinosaur themed. So my solution was to make my own. That was a clay sculpture out of this multicolored clay that you can find in most crafts and stationery shops. The head is still with me, but the rest of him is kind of dissolved. Well, not dissolved, but crumbled.
I'm gonna go
But
ahead and
yeah,
put forth that you ate it.
no, no. The
He totally
the the color on that thing definitely didn't look appetizing by the end of it.
did. Oh, I imagine. If you were if you were playing with dollar store clay, it probably looked like mud.
It did by the time I was done with it. Like it had plenty of color to begin with, but because I kept running out and wanted to keep expanding the sculpture, I ended up mixing colors together, which did end up looking like mud.
Tasty, tasty mud.
Yep. So yeah.
I like that you said yep. So you
Oh
did.
yeah. No.
Go
No.
ahead.
Are we done?
I don't know. Are we?
But yeah, so started off as a sculpture. Eventually, I started wanting to write my own stories because, well, I was bored with the kind of stories I could get on TV and in books, especially dinosaur-themed ones. There wasn't much in the way of xenofiction at the time. Still isn't. But yeah, especially after Jurassic Park 3 and how angry little me was at what they'd done to my beloved T-Rex, I decided I want to write my own story from the T-Rex's perspective. So my T-Rex sculpture turned into a character, and that was the beginnings of Crusher. Now, Crusher as a character is a bit of an amalgamation of several things. Like, there are references to the real world in some of his physical features, like, for example, the scar down the side of his face. That's a reference to the scar on my cheek that I got when I was very young. Some of the mannerisms were childhood idealizations of my dad that ended up getting incorporated into Crusher's design. There was a lot going on there. But end of the day, Crusher was more or less a power fantasy
More or less.
to get back at what they'd done in Jurassic Park 3.
Yeah, and especially since they added that kill move in Jurassic Park Operation Genesis, where the T-Rex gets its revenge. That
Yeah.
was, I think, a huge reason why the ISS trailer blew up the way it did.
Yeah, definitely. But honestly, I didn't even know that the Crusher mod was even a thing until after it was done and turned into a video. Because what ended up happening was, again, Crusher began life as a sculpture, moved on to an OC in a roleplay. Several roleplays, actually. The very first I can remember was the JPL roleplay community. I forget the name of it. I think it was called the Live the Legend RPG, something like that. But that was the very first exposure I had to people role playing as the dinosaurs rather than as characters on Isla Sorna or Isla Nubla, right?
Hmm.
So that was my first encounter with the idea. I decided what better way to start writing my story than there. Of course, the thing with that RPG was that they had their rules changed shortly after I joined, and they basically took all humanizing traits out of the characters, where you couldn't even have dialogue or anything of the like. So you were literally reduced to basic animal behaviors. Even interactions between characters were just grunts and threat displays and all that, which quickly got very, very boring. I think I only managed 2 or 3 posts on that RP before giving up on it. The second place that I went to, as you know, because actually, I don't even remember. You weren't part of the modding Genesis community, were you?
No, that was before my time. That would have
Yeah,
been like really early 2000s, right?
that would have been 2005.
Yeah, I was 11 at the time, and
Hmm.
I wasn't really on the internet at that point in my life.
Hmm.
I didn't actually start getting into creative writing until I discovered the Warrior series and fanfiction.net. That was
Hmm.
my first foray into being a writer. And then after that, I was hanging out on YouTube because I started my YouTube
Hmm.
channel in, I think, 2007. Really early days
Hmm.
of YouTube. That was around when the Isla Sorna Stories trailer dropped, and the rest
Yeah.
is history.
Yeah. So before all that happened, after leaving JPL, I moved on to Modding Genesis, which was, as the name implies, a modding website dedicated to Jurassic Park Operation Genesis. And initially, I was just there to get mods for this brand new Jurassic Park game that I was really excited about. But over time, I started thinking, well, these mods tend to not come out very frequently or very quickly. And there's a lot of downtime in between. Like the site was fairly quiet.
Mm-hmm.
So the solution that I came up with was to try and incorporate this new hobby that I discovered, creative writing, role plays, into the site. At this point, I had been active there long enough that I was part of the moderating team. So I pitched this idea. I thought, why don't we open up a section of the site for role plays? That way, people have some kind of activity between the mods. So it's not all modding, because modding in and of itself isn't going to keep the site active for very long. It'll end up dying off. People only check in every few weeks, every few months to see what the new mod there is. The administration there liked it, liked the idea initially. They said, yeah, sure, why not? Opened up a new section on the site, put me in charge of it. And that's how the original Isla Sorna Stories RPG began. So Crusher found new life there. And that's where the core community that ended up on the site, that's where it began. So you had myself, you had I'm not going to say his actual name just in case he doesn't want me to. DT Catch
Mm-hmm.
on YouTube, aka Tyrannosaurus Titanus on RPG Utopia, which we'll get to in a minute.
Mm-hmm.
You also had a guy by the name of Megaraptor who did not really come back to the RP once. RPG Utopia became a thing. He was only there for a little bit. Horse Girl, who I'm still in contact with fairly frequently. And let me think. I think that's about it. Yeah, I think the only other person was Eternal Rocket Chick, who was part of the part of the group who made the mod later. Anyway, so I made up this little community of creative writers. I started pulling in other people, and before you knew it, the RPG section of this modding site was the fastest growing section on the site as a whole. It was where everyone was, which was expected. Well, I was expecting it because
You were
it's a
already a
lot
nerd.
easier. Yeah, fair enough. But it's a lot easier to write a story than to modify a game that was as difficult to modify at the time as JPOG was.
Yeah, I believe that 100%. I still remember the horror stories about how to get mods working in JPOG.
Yeah, and nobody really knew how to. Well, not many people in the community knew how to deal with the hex editors,
Mm-hmm.
which you'd need to do just to unpack the texture so you can modify the skin, you know?
Yeah.
And that's not even going into things like behavior. The first person that I remember doing an in-depth behavior mod for that game was Eternal Rocket Chick. As I recall, she was actually the beginning the of the explosion of mods that happened both on Modding Genesis and JPL,
Mm.
which they both ended up in a bit of a race there, a kind of arms race where mods were concerned. But yeah, that's deviating a little bit away from the story. Anyway, after the drama and problems that we had with Modding Genesis, I decided, you know what, the best solution to this problem, since I can't seem to get to write these stories that I want to write, the best alternative is just make my own place so that I'm not subject to the whims of administrators on another website. Because that's what it was at the end of the day. It was that the administration on Modding Genesis thought that these RPGs were pulling away from the intention of the site.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why they shut down the RPG section. Which, fair enough, that's their choice. It's their website, their vision. They can do whatever they want with it. But for me, it was kind of a kick in the teeth because this was basically my baby. I was the one who suggested the idea. I was the one who, uh, uh, for lack of a best term, administered it. I made sure that everything was going smoothly. So to see it just shut down after the time and effort that I put into it, that hurt, especially for teenage me, a kid who before that point didn't have much in the way of self confidence or anything. This was my first taste of, yeah, you know what? I can do things. I'm I can actually do something if I want to do it. So the decision that I went with was, well, if I can't get to write these stories and pursue this hobby of mine on another website, then the only solution is to make my own. And that really was the issue, was that there were no sites where there was enough of a following for a Jurassic Park themed roleplay. You could find RPGs for other genres. You could find things like Lord of the Rings RPGs, uh, superhero RPGs based in the Marvel or DC universes. You could probably find those. Science fiction, all of that stuff kind of existed. But Jurassic Park was a relatively limited niche field where roleplay was concerned. So I decided the best thing I could do was to make my own website, put my RPG on there. That way I wasn't subject to anyone else's rules. So that's what happened. I sent some private messages to the people that I knew were active in the Modding Genesis RP, be they on Modding Genesis itself or on other sites I knew them from. Like Horsegal, for example, was not very active on Modding Genesis, but she was active in some of the Zoo Tycoon modding websites.
Ah, it starts to fall together. I remember those
Yeah,
communities were super intertwined back in the day, especially when
yeah,
Zoo Tycoon 2 came out.
yeah. Not even just Zoo Tycoon 2. This was, as I recall, I think it might have been before Zoo Tycoon 2's modding community picked up. So this was still back in the day of Zoo Tycoon 1 Dino Digs modding.
Hmm.
I knew her there. I knew her on Modding Genesis, but again, she wasn't active there. She wasn't, sorry, she wasn't active on Modding Genesis. So the easiest way to get in touch with her was to go to the Zoo Tycoon site and DM her there. So that's what I did. I got in touch with her. I got in touch with Megarapt. I got in touch with DT Couch, who I think was still using that screen name on Modding Genesis, but I can't recall at this point. It's been too
Hmm.
long. But yeah, once I got in touch and found out that they were still interested, I said, you know what, guys, I'm going to make my own website. Would you be interested in joining? And they said, yeah, absolutely. So now that I had my base community, I thought, time to go ahead. So spoke to my parents about it. They said, okay, we know that this is uh, an important thing for you. This is your hobby and it's developing your writing skills. You should nurture that. So they financed the founding of the website. And that's how the RPG Utopia iteration of our Jurassic Park roleplay started. So Crusher had a new life and now wasn't bound to the whims of another website's administration. A few months after that, we decided this is all great, but just the four of us can't just roleplay forever. We need roleplay by definition is interactive, so you need a bigger community to make sure that things stay fresh. So we decided that we needed a few ads. Now, at this point in time, I didn't know what Data Couch had in mind. So I said, "Yeah, sure, whatever we want to do, I'm down. Just let me know." A few weeks later, I get surprised with a video that he links to me, and it turns out that he and ERC, Eternal Rocket Chick, had worked on this mod in secret, specifically for the ad. They made the skin as close to the description I put in the RP as possible. They found some music, they filmed a few clips. God, there were so many clips. According to GT Couch, there were so many cases where those death duels went badly and the T-Rex died. So, yeah, the glamour behind this whole epic montage of T-Rex just killing everything, that isn't how the filming went. But you already know this. I'm sure you've done plenty of video game themed videos yourself, and you've seen
Oh
how
yeah.
unpredictable things can be.
Especially when you're trying to wrangle your friends into helping you. And then you gotta fucking
Yeah.
organize everybody's schedules and make sure everybody's on the same page.
Yep.
Oh,
And
it's a
that's
nightmare.
when you've got all the elements in the video coordinating. Imagine trying to sort out the game's AI that does not care what you want and will do whatever the hell it wants to do. It, it apparently took days and days and days of constant filming of forced death duels to get that video put
Oh,
together.
I believe it.
But eventually they managed to finish it and slapped a link onto my, I think it was MSN at the time.
God, we're really showing our
Yeah,
age.
yeah,
MSN, AIM.
yeah. I've still got some of our old AIM conversations saved, by the way.
Oh God, would you please delete those?
No, they're good memories.
Oh God.
But yeah, so he showed me the video. I was understandably shocked. I didn't think that I'd get a video featuring my character specifically in such an epic fashion. I thought, if anything, he might make a video for his own character, or maybe a montage of several other characters. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Easter Sauna Stories video came out later. After he showed me that, I said, "It's amazing. I love it." And he said, "Yeah, okay, we'll upload it then, or not upload it. We'll make it live. We'll allow people to see it."
Mm-hmm.
And at this point in time, the JPOG modding community was just starting to kick off. So people are always looking for these for mods and mod videos. So the timing was perfect, and it shows because that's the main reason that Crush is as big as he is today.
Mm-hmm.
Pun not intended.
Can't even be a pun because he's smaller than he was at the height of his popularity.
Yeah, I've shrunk him down since then. God, I hesitate to poke fun at my own work because I was a kid and kids do dumb things all the time.
I'll poke fun at it
But,
for you.
yeah, I know you will. But yeah, for the 75-foot long T-Rex. Good lord.
Huge.
Yeah, massive. And part of the inspiration for that size was the also comically huge Giganotosaurus in Dino Crisis 2.
Right.
In fact, at one point in time, they were the exact same size before I downsized Crusher. So picture that thing, but T-Rex in Jurassic Park. That's basically what you were dealing with.
Careful, you're gonna kick off a wave of fresh OCs that big.
Yeah. For anyone who's listening to this video, my advice as a writer who's learned from that mistake, don't do that. You're free to do it if you want, but it's not smart. There are so many complications with writing that come as a result of oversizing and overpowering your character. I only learned that the hard way later. But yeah, that was the basis of Closure. The character backstory itself is, while not nuanced in any way, shape, or form compared to decent writing, it was nuanced compared to the video. So the backstory was that Crusher lost his parents very early. He's a mutant strain of Tyrannosaurus Rex, something that and this was before the whole hybrid concept that came up in Jurassic World. This was, God, I hesitate. Was it a decade before? I can't even remember when Jurassic World 1 came out.
That
But yeah.
was 2015?
Oh god, it was exactly a decade before. So yeah, Crusher was a
We
mutant
old.
strain. Yeah. Mutant strain that I came up with a decade before Jurassic World became a thing and hybrids became canon. But
Funnily
yeah.
enough, though, he wasn't the
Hmm?
first extremely brightly colored T-Rex to technically be canon. There was one of the toy lines, the Chaos Theory toys.
Yes. I think, in fact, those might have been at least partial inspiration for the original sculpture that I made. It was because I wanted one of those, but they didn't ship to my part of the world.
Yeah, and now you
So my
can't.
solution was to sculpt it.
Now you
So
can't
it
find them
all
at all
comes back
anymore.
around. Yeah, I grew old and never got to even put my hands on a real one. As far as the backstory is concerned, which I assume if anyone's interested in anything about this video, it'll probably be the backstory, because that's what people have been picking up and running away with the recent fan fictions, right?
Yep.
So yeah, Mhm. Good.
I was gonna say the main thing behind the Twitter roleplay that we stumbled across 2 years ago, I think, was the
Hmm.
guy wanted to give Crusher more flaws and make them more human. Was their
Oh, right.
reasoning?
The folly of someone who doesn't actually know the backstory and goes off of the video, which
Yeah.
shows absolutely nothing about the character. But yeah, um, the original character, like I said, mutant strain of T-Rex, bigger than usual, stronger than usual, uh, with a tendency to. I think I took the idea for the color shifting from the Stegosaurus in the Walking with Dinosaurs documentary, how
Makes
it used
sense.
to flush blood into the plates. I
Mm-hmm.
went with that idea with his entire body. The eyes and the brows in particular would turn red when he's enraged, but the base color for Crusher was actually a muted gray, which nobody ever saw because all the compilations featuring him were him supposedly enraged because we
And
couldn't bother making several different mods for Crusher.
yeah, and also he was always fucking angry in the RP too.
Yeah, yeah. Most severe case of anger management issues in Jurassic Park history, probably. But yeah, um, so color shifting was a thing that nobody ever saw. His size couldn't really be demonstrated in the original mod, but then there was right. It was called the Dino Poop mod, right?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Basically, what it would do was the dinosaurs in JPOG occasionally defecated, and the size would be random. So sometimes you'd have small ones, sometimes you'd have big ones. What one of the modders did, I can't remember who it was. I think it was TTR, or it might have been TTR who just adapted that mod to Crusher. Basically, it gave the option for Crusher to sometimes spawn as really, really massive. And that was the Crusher Almighty, or Crusher the Almighty video. And that's where the term that has spread in the fandom, that's where it came from. It's from that video. It
Mm-hmm.
was never something that I actually used myself. I never used that term. But yeah, so let me see. Size, color, anger management issues, strength. Those were the key features of Crusher as a character. Backstory: um, lost his parents really young to a large, large group of Spinosaurus, led by a mutant Spinosaurus, which had very similar traits to Crusher's mutant strain of T-Rex. So they could be a kind of foil to each other.
Mm-hmm.
Not that I even knew what a foil was at the time. But yeah, that was the basis of the story at the time. It was basically Crusher on this revenge quest. And different iterations of the RP had him at different ages. So the very first one was him fully grown. It basically started off with him going to that big fight with the uh, with the Spinosaurus, which was named Thrasher in the original story. I know, really creative names right there.
You know what I could do? I could actually, in post, slap the picture that I did of Thrasher over the video.
That could do that, yeah.
I think I
I
will.
would probably do it. I think if I do ever come back to the story, which now that I've seen the interest, I may actually come back and rewrite it with a bit more with with the benefit of experience to make it a not so childish power fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
I might even change Thrasher's design to be a bit more of a middle ground between JP and modern depictions of Spinosaurus, just to make them a bit more interesting,
Yeah. I think it'd be cool to give him the little fucking eel tail. Like, assuming that's still the current reconstruction in the next couple of years.
See, that's the concern, isn't it? Even if I were to rewrite him, there's no guarantee that he'd still be accurate by the time I'm done writing. But yeah, so Revenge Quest. He ends up totally destroying this Spinosaurus. Because of course he does. That's the whole point of this power fantasy. It's revenge on Jurassic Park 3.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
No beating around the bush here. It was just
n-
I'm
yeah,
mad that
it
the
was.
Spino killed the T-Rex.
Yeah, that's basically all it was. But after that was done, I realized, wait a minute, now what? So I started introducing more characters. I introduced his mate, Rampage, at the time. I later renamed her to Mirage for whatever reason. I think I just liked the sound of the name.
Hmm.
Hunter was their first child, well, their first hatchling, I suppose. And from there, the story kind of developed. I introduced a few other characters that weren't T-Rexes, like Ripper, supposedly the very first Velociraptor clone by InGen, which had features that were later removed from future iterations of Raptor, like the ones that we see in the first movie. So
Mm-hmm.
for example, extreme intelligence, they're actually in the canon of the RP. Supposedly, InGen toned that intelligence down because the first generation were just too smart, which is why, which was, funnily enough, the explanation for the other power fantasy that Rip was supposedly the peak of raptor behavior.
Mm-hmm.
Really strong, really stealthy, so on and so forth. You get the idea. But yeah, um, a lot of the rest of the story gets a bit fuzzy as far as my memory is concerned. But that's no surprise. I've got a terrible memory. Uh, but yeah, um, they just later on they just lived out their lives. So there were conflicts with other characters in the RP, and that's really the basis of the RP to begin with, was interaction between the characters.
Yeah.
So most of the rest of the story was just me reacting to whatever was happening in the RP with the other members,
Which was
rather
usually
than
just whatever people felt like doing in the minute. Like there
yeah.
was no plot consistency. There was that one time that you all pulled together and you were like, let's just rewrite the plot of The Lost World from the dinosaur's
Mhm.
perspective, which I
Yeah.
wasn't there for, and I'm sad that I missed.
Oh, that was fun.
Yeah, I imagine it was.
Because it was just completely nuts. The writing of that could fit in a Michael Bay movie more than it could in Jurassic Park. Yeah, there were lots of explosions, lots of tumbling cars, lots of caved-in walls and
That
facilities.
doesn't surprise me, considering you were writing Crusher, and he took the place of the Buck rampaging through San
Yeah.
Diego.
Oh yeah. God, that was fun. Ridiculous. Not realistic. Probably not particularly original, considering it's literally rewriting the thing, or ripping the plot and adding a few adjustments, but it was fun.
Hmm.
We also, I remember another couple of things was DT Cash, um, Megaraptor, and Horscow were also in San Diego, and they were used as a kind of explanation for that hand that we see on the wheel on
Hmm.
the SS Venture, because for the longest time, nobody could think of a way to justify how the T-Rex managed to get that person and take everything except for the hand, which is a plot hole that to this day doesn't make sense. So our way of explaining it was the Raptors got him and got the rest of the crew.
Yeah, I think that was actually the case in a deleted scene, but I would have to go back and check. Don't quote me on that.
Yeah. I do remember that in the Lego Jurassic World game, if you have a look at the SS Venture scene, there is a great big hole in the side of it where presumably the Rex reached in and bit the guy and dragged him out.
Mm-hmm.
But still, we've seen the mouths of these T-Rexes. There isn't exactly a clean enough cutoff point to where only the hand would be left.
No, I mean, if you
The
strain
hand,
things enough, they just tear and give.
yeah, but you're assuming for a second that the person who got bitten would have been able to maintain that grip while in severe agony, while literally being eaten, dead.
Adrenaline is a hell
So,
of a thing.
true. Honestly, I'm not sure. We'd probably have to look up the trivia to find out the answer to that.
Yeah,
But yeah,
I'm
that was the
I'm
explanation that we went for.
I'm relatively sure that there was a scene that got cut where the raptors ambushed the crew of the ship. They got on board somehow, and they
Yeah,
were just omitted from the finale for whatever reason,
whatever reason. Yeah,
budget or time. Probably budget.
yeah,
let's
probably.
let's be real.
Yeah, which is a pity because I think that would have been a really cool added. Uh, what's the word I'm looking for?
Complication.
Perspective, complication to deal with. That the Raptors are loose in San Diego. How
Yeah.
on earth are you gonna get them?
Yeah, it's actually kind of funny that they didn't end up doing that, considering where Jurassic World ended up going.
Yeah,
Like if you were gonna spoiler if people haven't seen Fallen Kingdom or Dominion, if you're gonna release raptors into the wilderness anyway, why would you not just commit and have them already be there? You know, that could have
yeah,
been a really interesting direction to take Blue's character. But now we're getting
mm,
sidetracked.
yeah. Again,
Happens a lot with us.
because yeah, I can't keep to a single strain of thought to save my life. But
Strain of
yeah,
thought.
train of thought. This is going back to what you said about straining things hard enough. My brain is still hooked on that word.
You're welcome.
But yeah, so yeah, really that was about it as far as Crush's backstory is concerned. We rewrote the storyline through the movies. I think at the very end, before we rebooted, the reboot's a completely other story. But
Mm-hmm.
before we rebooted, I think the last thing we did was, believe it or not, well, you'll believe it. Don't think the audience is going to believe it. An end of the world scenario, or rather, post-apocalyptic scenario.
I
Basically,
do remember that.
yeah, basically it turned into something along the lines of humanity gets wiped out by some kind of disease, and the population's only a tiny fraction of what it used to be, and the survivors decide have reverted to not quite Mad Max, but still kind of tribal-ish society,
Mm-hmm.
while maintaining their technology mind. And someone somewhere decided, you know what, I want my own pet dinosaurs to show my power. So sends a bunch of people to Isla Sorna to get the dinosaurs for him. This was all just an excuse to give us another shot at dinosaurs in the admittedly formerly human world. So it was basically a change of scenery so that we could deal with things like houses, skyscrapers, vehicles, all that good stuff. So that
Mm-hmm.
we're not just writing forest all the time.
Am I remembering wrong, or was it specifically New York that the dinosaurs
Yes,
ended up in?
it was New York. It was New York. Which I think wouldn't I don't remember was the were the five deaths in the Atlantic or the Pacific? Because that could be an interesting
Uh,
complication to our plotline if it was in the Pacific.
God, think they were Atlantic. Hang on. I need to do some Google foo.
Basically, it was an opportunity for people to experience the human setting if they missed the original Lost World plot.
Yeah.
And there was this whole thing where Crusher's youngest hatchling, which for whatever reason I named Serena at the time, based on Jane, the T-Rex skeleton Jane.
Mm-hmm.
She gets lost in New York, separated from her family. So Crusher's off on this quest to try and find her, and butchering anything in the way, as is the Crusher way. And her learning to be an effective survivor on her own. It was a fun little plot, even though it was still relatively basic compared to my writing these days.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I
Well,
think
we've we're I'm approaching 30. You're past 30 at this point as of tomorrow.
Mhm.
Um. So yeah, to compare our writing when we were 13, 14, even 18 to now is unfair to you.
Yeah, but I will give myself, well, younger me credit. I did put a little bit of thought into how to make that plot interesting, at
Mm-hmm.
least for anyone reading my side of it, because goodness knows I couldn't control everything and didn't want
Yeah.
to control everything. So I did put a bit of thought into it, but yeah, it's nothing compared to what I'd write these days. Still, it was a fun story. At the end of it, they somehow, some way, managed to get back to Sauna. I don't even want to think about how I managed to pull that off. I can't remember. But
I don't remember either. I would have to go back and try and search through 1,200 pages to figure it out.
yeah, and 20 posts per page, and God knows how many 100 words per post. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not worth it.
Although let's be fair, 100 words per post would be generous for most of them.
For most of them. I did have a reputation for walls of text, though,
Yeah, but
which
let's
I
let's
still haven't shaken.
yeah, but let's be real. Most of the people in that RP at one point were just maybe writing one or two sentences a pop.
True. Yeah. But yeah, once, almost immediately as they returned, I think, the RP got scrapped and rebooted because I had officially run out of ideas and nobody else had any ideas. We
And
called a vote and decided to restart. Plus, I kind of wrote us all into a corner with that stupid plot twist with Crusher's brother, of all things. Which,
I
surprise, is a. Mhm.
I vaguely remember that. I wouldn't call it stupid though, because I remember at the time that was just after I had finished dog grooming school and I was back on the site. Um,
Hmm.
and you were telling me that you wanted to pull away from the fact that you had relied so heavily on the Lion King to make Crusher's story interesting. So, so you were doing your best to kind of stop relying on old habits. So yeah, I
And
wouldn't.
fell right into the same mistake again, in that Crusher and his brother were almost direct parallels to Scar and Mufasa.
Well, I mean, I keep telling you, no story in this day and age is completely 100% original. And if you're
Yeah.
gonna drive yourself crazy trying to write something that is, because you're always gonna find references to the things that you enjoy in your writing. That's
Hmm.
just that's just what being a writer is. We're all pulling
Yeah.
from each other.
Yeah. I think that was one of the motivations for the reboot. Now that I think about it, because after the reboot, I started with Crusher at a much younger age and basically just learning to become effective on his own as a survivor. I
Mm-hmm.
think it was essentially Teenage Crusher. But at that point, the activity in that RPG had died out because people had already done all this before. They weren't really interested in doing the whole dinosaur thing anymore. So I think it only
And
lasted a few hundred pages before
yeah, and we were all
it
getting
stopped.
older and starting to work our first jobs and all that. So
Mhm.
we don't have the kind of time that we did when we were 14 to just sit and write 100 pages of a
Yeah,
roleplay every day.
yeah. Plus, even if we did have the time, we'd want to spend it on something that's a bit more nuanced and detailed, which is where the fantasy RPGs and all that came into things.
Mm-hmm.
More complex characters, more complex plots. It gives you more wiggle room when role playing.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, that's essentially the full history of Crusher. Of course, he also went through a few design changes, which is why his appearance now is not the appearance that you'll see in the mods, because I have changed that look to something a bit more natural. I still need to finish that one picture with Crusher and your character Steel Talon
Oh
staring
god.
menacingly at something in the background,
Let's
or
not
in the
mention
foreground,
my
rather.
character lest people get curious.
Mm.
The
There
short
was some
version of that
interesting.
No, no, don't even mention interesting. Don't get them curious. Yeah,
I think it's interesting.
you would. You would,
Mm.
bitch. Anyway.
Hey, there are kids watching this video, probably.
Probably.
Maybe.
They'll learn a few new words.
Fair enough.
Yeah, the very short version of the story of my character is I was an edgelord teen writing an edgelord character that was no different than the billion other edgelord first characters out there. And of course, she was a raptor that somehow survived fights with gigas and fairies and spinos and T-Rexes. Pretty sure I mentioned at one point that she had a T-Rex bite scar somewhere. Don't ask me how that worked.
Let's not forget the tranquilizer incident.
I don't want to talk about the tranquilizer incident.
Uh,
Don't do drugs, kids.
Yeah. That's the gist of it right there. Right. So I think at this point we've covered everything there is to cover about the backstory. So here we could probably just move into this fanfic by Tyrannosaur King.
Yes, the whole reason that we're even talking about this.
Apologies, Tyrannosaur King, if you're watching this. I am going to look at it through the same lens as I would have been working through when I was first writing the character, not how I'd write him today. Anyways, this story will be about Crusher when he was very young, slight difference from the Wattpad version, leading up to when he was in his prime. And like Rexy herself, he establishes his role as the most feared tyrant king of the island. Why do you have to remind me? I'd almost forgotten. Oh no.